Fiora. So this panel is Island Revitalization Strategies, and we just had a little changeover of one of the papers. So Weiying will be talking first about Lamma Island.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Ohio. It's early morning, first presentation, last day. Thank you for coming. My name is Weiying. I'm a PhD student at the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Personally, my doctoral project explores the infrastructure space in contemporary China, focusing on desires, imaginations, and uncertain futures. So one chapter of my dissertation is dedicated to islands as infrastructure, with case studies of the second and third largest islands of mainland China, Hainan Island and Chongming Island. However, for this presentation, I will focus on a smaller island, Lamma Island in Hong Kong. The choice is not only due to my personal connection to the island where I currently reside, but also because I think exploring middle-scale infrastructural islanding also is able to decentralize the narrative of island studies in the Anthropocene era. So Lamma Island is the third largest island of Hong Kong, which sets the southern end of Hong Kong Island. It covers like 14 square kilometers and has a population about 6,700. There are two public piers to connect with Hong Kong Island. If you are hiking from one to another pier, it typically takes about 1.5 hours. Access to Lamma Island is not difficult, but there are no chain stores or private cars available on the island. So the only available modes of transportation on the island are small village delivery trucks and private bicycles. So here's the view when you get off from the ferry. Okay. However, it is worth noting that the public piers at two, the Sokuwan and the Rongshuwan were constructed in the 1990s after World War II and do not have such a long-standing history. So in the following of my talk, I will follow this structure. First, I will introduce Lamma Island from the perspective of archaeological, geological, and cultural perspectives. And I will explore some ideas about the island in conceptual framework and future narrative. The second part, I will introduce more context about infrastructure, landscape, and aesthetics of Lamma Island, and with some artworks, like sci-fi video work and public art project. Then I will give a brief conclusion. So Lamma Island has a long history dating back to the Tang and Song dynasty, 1,000 years ago, when it was a stopover for foreign merchants on their way to Guangzhou. It was called Guoliao Zhou, meaning harbor for the foreigners. So its official history can be traced back to 1464, and it was marked as here you can see number 1 on the map. It's Guoliao Zhou Lamma Island, and the number 10 is Hong Kong. The English name Lamma Island appeared on the maps before the 19th century, but the official name was not used until 1967, after World War II. Also, the Chinese translation of Lamma, nOileán, refers to island's location in the source of Hong Kong, and the shape of land which looks like the letter Y. I'm not very sure if that looks like the letter Y, but it's the English name of the Lamma Island. Then the newspaper occasionally used Guoliao to refer Lamma until the 1970s. In this brief account of how Lamma come to be named and its use as a stopover point on the maritime trade road, Lamma Island is not just an island in the ocean, but rather an island that connects to the ocean. Also in this 16th century map, the visualization of islands seems as mountains either concealed within or floating upon the ocean. Also in the Chinese Dictionary of Etymology, island or shima means hills found in the sea that provide rest stops. So this provides additional insight into the geographic character of small islands that possess both elevated terrain and landmass. Then archaeological findings reviews Lamma's history and cultural identity. First, Father Daniel Fan from Ireland conducted early field work on the island from 1933 to 1936. Also, a Chinese Marxist historian and scholar Jian Bozan visited from late 1947 to middle 1948 and published his notes about fieldwork on llamas' prehistoric remains in the magazine on Hong Kong hikers. Then the pottery and stone tools found in Neolithic and Bronze ages indicate that people settled on Lamma as far as back to 6,000 to 7,000 years ago, although there's no comprehensive publication in this field yet. Lamma Island also has one kamikaze cave related to World War II war memory. It was planned as an operation based by the Japanese Navy to launch suicidal attacks, but it was not put to use since the war ended. Today, this cave serves as a tourist spot for visitors and hikers. Rather, it physically archives the war memory of the Japanese colonization period of Hong Kong on Lamma Island. Culturally speaking, the Tianho's birthday celebration honoring the goddess of sea is the most important religious event on the island. There are over 100 Tianho temples in Hong Kong, 3 of which were built on Lamma during 18th and 19th centuries. Other events include dragon boat races and flying dragon events, showcase the Icelanders' cultural heritage as a fishing village. There is also a large foreign population, around 23% on Lamma, drawn by cheaper rent and large living spaces compared to the city, as well as a tranquil natural environment. So to provide a brief overview, Lamma Island has a rich history of archaeology discoveries that are still being explored. Local religious and cultural activities are an integral part of Lamma's identity and occasionally attract short-term visitors. Lamma is recognized as a multicultural island with both a rural village and an international community. Also, according to an official introduction video to Lamma Island, it states the general planning of Lamma is conserve the natural landscape, rural character, and car-free environment while enhancing the role of Lamma Island as a leisure destination. I think this description presents a basic understanding and approach to cultivating small islands. However, there remain questions that require further attention, such as how can expand our planetary and local creativity and advance our understanding of culture, technology, ecology, and the future. Then I'd like to mention some theoretical framework or conceptual framework and future narratives about the island. I propose studying Lamma Island using the concepts of utopia, Anthropocene aesthetics, and infrastructure, which they are interconnected and entangled with each other. The idea of utopian island is classical and ubiquitous, as seen in works like Huxley's final novel, Iceland, which presents a utopian view of society set at a remote island, and also a classic Chinese-style Peach Blossom Spring tells a fisherman who accidentally discovers a hidden utopia. However, the utopian imagery of Iceland also represent their fragility and contrast to the reality or real space. This paradoxical relationship of this utopian to the age of the Anthropocene is worth considering, as human activities have become the dominant force in changing the planet Earth. This has had an especially instantaneous and dramatic impact on islands with risks in sea level and ocean temperature, soil erosion, and leakage of toxic substance, among other factors. Then the crisis between nature and humans, disasters and hopes calls for the reconsideration of our current age. For example, Paul and Chandler proposed the idea of the Anthropocene islands, which addresses how contemporary thinking engages and works with islands, such as the human nature divided of modernity is today frequently argued to have a collapse, and work on the Anthropocene intensively focuses upon the new problematic of how humans are relational, entangled with more than human forces of transformative planetary changes. Also, the transformation of islands in the Anthropocene context is at the heart of critical infrastructure, which encompasses the technologies of infrastructure, islanding, such as in the notion de-island, island that have been connected by man-made structures, such as bridges and viaducts, are often perceived as having lost some of their islandness. Ocean media is a media studies approach to the new technologies of navigating scene and remotely sensing maritime space that are producing new geospatial knowledge as well as the Anthropocene knowledge. Also, like Brian Larkin's notion of politics and poetics demonstrate both technical politics and the certain aesthetics, emotions, or ambient experience that are represented and created by infrastructure space. Kind of following this conceptual framework, I will continue with the study of infrastructure space on Lamma Island, was to introduce two art projects. Here, as Lamma's wind terrain on the hill, it stands like 71 meters tall and has a tower from Germany and rotor blades from Denmark, built by the Hong Kong Electric Company in 2006. It was Hong Kong's first wind power station. Also, there is a plan about expanding wind farm infrastructure could make Lamma Island more visible or reinforce its identity as a small island, a mix in the infrastructure landscape. Also, this power plant on Lamma Island is the most striking and eye-catching infrastructure landscape with 3 chimneys from the power station. It has been operated by Hong Kong Electric Company since 1982. Before the power plant was built, electric power relied on submarine cables during 1960s. The power plant has been rebuilt 3 times through land reclamation since 1962. So the power plant built in 1990s also reflects globalization, as foreign engineers were brought in for its design and construction. The infrastructure aesthetics showcase the coexistence of the tradition fishing village island and the modern infrastructure project, incorporating kind of sci-fi elements as cyberpunk aesthetics and futuristic imaginations. So here's the film clips from 2021 film Power Off by a French director, portrays a mysterious event in Hong Kong that cuts off the city's electricity, plugging it into darkness. So this movie reference to the electric infrastructure on Lamma Island. Although the film underscores the importance of electric infrastructure in Hong Kong's urban space and how it dominates life, it also raises intriguing question about the implications of using an island as infrastructure. More question like how does it differ from using the mainland or peninsula? How does the ecology of islandness shape the future infrastructure space? Then the last project a recent project is the public art project. Okay, it's happening in 2021 and 2022. It serves as an official archive of culture, oral history, and the spatial narrative of Lamma Island community. So I don't think I have time to explain the notion, but it's in Japanese notion about maybe shima and shima, or some like the elements about island. So for my conclusion, I'd like to summarize some key points for Lamma's future as addressed in my presentation. First, regarding the infrastructure development of Lamma Island, according to Hong Kong Electric, they plan to develop an offshore wind farm in support of the government's goal of achieving net zero electricity generation and carbon neutrality by 2050. And also, there are also other proposals from the think tank group titled Hong Kong 2030. It suggests to remove the power plant or connect Lamma Island with other islands with the bridges. So I think this proposal reflects a desire for infrastructure construction from a top-down or centralized perspective. However, it is important to be mindful of the concept of kind of a greenwash, as infrastructure plans and desires can often overlook the physical ecology and the cultural identity that are intertwined with infrastructure landscape. It is also crucial to reconsider and reimagine Lamma's infrastructure space through counter-aesthetics and non-human elements. Yeah, that's it. Here are some resources for my presentation. Okay. Thank you for listening. Hope that if you have any questions.
Okay, we've got time for some questions. I've got a question. You mentioned the population was about 6,000?
6,700.
What's the history of population increase and decline, and how many people have come to the island to work in the kind of the power industry and things like that?
Oh, yeah, thank you for the question. Yeah, so actually during Qing Dynasty, like more people immigrant from mainland to Lamma Island. So they kind of settled down, but also Qing government during the kind of they want to control the deal with the problem of private in like Taiwan. So they kind of remove the residents from Lamma to mainland. Then after that, the late Qing Dynasty, more people resettled to Lamma. So kind of that history in the modern period. Then during maybe before the World War II, more people coming to Lamma for like fishing or agricultural work there. But after maybe the 1990s, the ferries, the piers, the more like connection or transportation system were built between the Hong Kong Island and Lamma Island. Like a young generation, they were going to the mainland or Hong Kong Island, like working there. So they're kind of a depopulation issues. But now I think more foreign communities and people like me, like studying in Hong Kong, like maybe want to stay on Lamma Island. More artists, they want to have different life from Hong Kong and the urban life, so they move to Lamma.
It's more relaxed. It's a more relaxed lifestyle, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. There are no cars or no chain stores, so quite different from the Hong Kong environment. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Thank you. Tomorrow we will go to Naoshima. You will notice it's a similar situation. On the north is Mitsubishi Refinery. On the south is the Utopian Art Museum, Japan's art island. In the middle is like a sandwich for community kind of stuck between those two powerful organizations. So I guess it's quite similar, like you mentioned, the aesthetic part and non-aesthetic part. So yeah, I mean that's my question is how have you do any community-based research to ask what local people think about this process and how the power dynamic perceived by local in your case study?
Okay. Thank you for your question, Dr. Chu. I moved to Lamma actually during the COVID, so I didn't really have good amount of resource about the community. But I know that there is a village organization. They kind of plays a role as agency between government and the residents. So if the government propose some plans, like infrastructure plans, they will kind of community have or organize maybe the conference or some seminars to talk about the issues. So I think there is a way to community or strategies to protect their village life world through this agency. I think it works. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Maybe in the future field we can think about the bottom-up part.
Okay, sure.
Good job.
How are we doing for time? One more question?
Maybe one quick one.
In one of your slides, you showed the power company? It looked like,
power station.
Yeah, the power station.
Yeah.
It looked like it was on reclaimed land, or had it been flattened land? I was just interested in how.
So this one?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's all reclaimed land, is it? It's like a.
Yeah.
It's like another island.
It's like added to the. It's kind of reclamation and artificial island, small artificial island affiliation. Yeah.
So does it have a commuting population? Do people live on the Lamma Island and commute to Hong Kong for work?
Yeah.
Because you mentioned there's a lot of foreigners.
Right. I think half of people, population, community, to Hong Kong Island or the peninsula, me as well. So if I go to school, I need to take 2 ferries.
So there are frequent ferries connecting to Hong Kong? There are frequent ferries?
Yeah. From early 5 p.m. to late 12:30 midnight. So it's very frequent. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
Our next paper is Mike Evans and Stephen Foster, and they'll be talking about the ecology of seaweeds.
So thank you, and what a pleasure it is to be here. Thank you so much for the hospitality that's been shown. It's been a wonderful few days. I want to start by acknowledging that we've added an author, Fiona MacDonald, to the paper, and so I'm going to point that out. In this paper, we're going to focus on the emerging role of seaweed in Ceantar nOileán, or the districts of islands, in particularly the island of Lettermullen in the Connemara region of Galway. The context here is actually the ecology of heritage development in Ireland, and then more specifically the role of seaweed as the center of development in Lettermullen. The heritage sector in Ireland is extraordinarily well developed and focuses on a range of domains with emphasis on the history of the Republic and the decolonial process, starting and very much emphasizing rebellion in 1916 and subsequent events. But indeed ranges from there to a whole series of language and culture related initiatives, and works its way all the way down to, if you like, or all the way to place and to very localized museums and heritage centers. I'm going to focus on Western Ireland here, or the Gaeltacht, and in particular the Blasket Islands Centre associated with Dunquin, which is the mainland island connection for the Blaskets, Galway Bay, and Connemara. There's considerable interest in these regions within the context of Ireland, specifically because of the centrality of these areas for the recovery of Irish language and cultural heritage. Also significant here is an intertwining of, again, Republican history and the recovery of language and culture that's associated with that history, and in particular, the Padraig Pearse's cottage in Connemara. And here you see, this is just a Google Maps image of Galway Bay, which is one of the key centers of the Gaeltacht. And indeed, there are, this map shows the 2011 use of Irish language, and you can see here that the Dingle Peninsula and the Blasket Islands in the south there, Galway Bay, including the Aran Islands, and Connemara, and then Donegal in the north are the key, or where you find the most Irish today. The Blasket Centre is a tremendous facility located in Dunquin, just across from the Blaskets. You can see the Blaskets in the distance there. And indeed, the Blaskets were particularly important for the recovery of Irish language and the development of an Irish language literature at the turn of the 20th century, with works by first Thomas O'Crone. This book translates to Island Crosstalk and was an Irish language publication, and then subsequently several publications based on the oral histories and oral testimonies of Blasket Islanders have been published. The Aran Islands, famously the location of an early quasi-documentary film by Flaherty, also the home of a now defunct heritage center that focused on that film and the various misrepresentations and reappropriations of those by contemporary Irish scholars, and now the focus of archaeological, now focused on archaeological sites on the island, but nonetheless still a significant actor within the context of Irish heritage, both international and national. And then Padraig Pearse's cottage here. You should see the similarities between the architecture of Pearse's cottage and the Blaskets, and that's because the architect from the Office of Public Works is the same architect. And these are remarkably emplaced facilities. They very much melt into the landscape or fit into the landscape, and are positioned very carefully in the context of those landscapes. So very much place-based. And again, Pearse's cottage is significant for the way that it knits not only the recovery of Irish language and culture, but also its role in the context of the development of the Irish Republican state. The rest of the talk, we're going to focus on the Lettermullen Heritage Center, located here on the island of Lettermullen. Please note the very close proximity to the Aran Islands. The Aran Islands get associated now with Galway and Galway Bay, but of course they're actually much closer to Connemara and the islands of the district. It's 8 nautical miles from Lettermullen to Aran, and indeed for long periods of time there were ongoing connections between these two regions, specifically the movement of seaweeds and the collection of seaweeds in both places, and the trade in peat, turf. between the two areas, and it's not coincidental that they are both currently Irish language heavy in relative terms. So the Heritage Center is actually very much the creation of this man, John Babajak O'Connelly. Here you see his photo from the Irish Times, a quite recent article. He actually started the center, and it would be fair to say that he's a key activist in terms of the development of the Heritage Center, and a great deal of energy, community-based energy, to try to save the population. To recover the population and maintain the population in the islands. In this Irish Times article, he's actually quite pessimistic about the prospects for maintaining both the level of language fluency on the island and the population on the island. But indeed, I'm not sure that pessimism is warranted, although it seems a little strange to gainsay someone of such centrality to the process. But here you'll see the population of Lettermolen actually drops from about a little over 500 in 1901, when the islands were actually linked to the mainland through a series of bridges and causeways, and then is stable yet low from 1971 to 2006, and the latest available figures for 2016 actually show the population recovering to just over 260. Small numbers, but that's a 20% increase in population over the 10-year period from 2006 to 2016, and that is the period of this concerted activism on the part of Keneally and his colleagues. So the labor history of Lettermolen is very much a history of seaweed. Early ethnography from the turn of the 20th century notes that the community is one of fishermen and kelp burners who till a little land and keep a few cattle and sheep. Basically, people are using kelp for both subsistence farming, but also burning kelp to produce fertilizers and iodine, which are being sold in order to meet the land rents of the period. And this actually, again, is a very similar pattern to what you see in the Aran Islands at around the same time. And indeed, there are ethnographies for both places at around the same time. That is the turn of the late 19th and turn of the 20th century. So seaweed is used for several things. Again, agriculture is a very old technique for creating potato beds using seaweed, and then burning for a commodity. There are different seaweeds. I should hasten to add, but nonetheless the techniques are similar, and some of the ecological constraints. The linking of these islands to the mainland also has a consequence in terms of the loss of some economic diversity. Specifically, law enforcement was able to suppress the production of poutine, which is a form of whiskey that was produced on these islands and previously provided a source of income, if not a source of entertainment. There was an earlier discussion of, I think, Mo, you were talking about bridges ironically decreasing population, and I think that there's something to be said about that here as well. So with the advent of the Irish Free State, and specifically land reform, things obviously changed, but these islands remain marginal at best. Seaweed remains an economic factor, though, and in particular, the company Aramara Tiorata was a seaweed firm owned by the Irish state, and eventually transferred to the government department, which is in charge of the Gael talk and the efforts to recover and maintain Irish language and culture. Literally owned this state agent, this company, and in 2014, the company was sold to the Canadian company, Acadia Seed Plants, which is a highly capitalized company which specializes in mechanical harvesting of seaweeds. And it was a specific intention of the transfer to recapitalize and enhance the seaweed industry, although it caused considerable concern amongst seaweed harvesters, partly because of considerable confusion over the leasing of the rights for seaweed harvesting, which previously had been connected to foreshore ownership, but somewhere along the line has become complicated, and in many ways it seems almost at a transition point between customary and legislated regimes and regulations. Nonetheless, the seaweed industry was and is very much connected to the Gael Trek and the Irish-speaking portions of the country and the population. All kinds of people now, of course, trying to figure out how to enhance the value add from seaweed and specifically linking it to the tourist industry. This is actually from West Cork, but there is indeed a seaweed center which is connected to the museum, which is connected to a community center, which connects to and houses Irish language colleges for youth in Ireland, and is very much supported by the various organizations, all of which are, all of these organizations here are connected to economic development in the Gael Trek. So here, language, seaweed, and economic development are all very much connected and have been for some time. So seaweed once burned as a commodity now is being sold as a commodity, but as a luxury, and as a luxury connected to place, connected to the islands. And so here you see this is lettermullen, and these are some of the products which are sold at the Seaweed Center. The Seaweed Center also has a cafe attached to it because it is attached to the museum complex, Heritage Center complex, and there are a series of baths inside the center that you can enjoy. Very much connected to attempts to renew tourism in the area, but fundamentally linked not to the production, well, that's a oversimplification, fundamentally linked to an effort to repopulate the area. And that's not just about generating tourist income from tourism. It's connected to trying to create a context for people to live and work in the area. There's an audio tour connected to the Seaweed Center, which is not really connected to the Seaweed Center. The Seaweed Center is a portal. There's an app for this if you want to have a look for it. It's actually very much a place, a series of QR codes, and recounts various elements of local history on lettermullen. Now, the emplacement of that history, is very much part of a conceptual linking amongst the people of the area, and certainly in the strategy headed by Keneally, linking place and seaweed people, as has been the case for centuries. It's an open question as to whether or not this will be successful in terms of long-term maintenance of population, enhancement of population. But there's no question that the ecological consequences to the transformation of seaweed harvesting and the long-term health of the population in the area are fundamentally linked. These last three photos are Stephen's photos, and quite accidentally, I need to hasten to add, that is John Keneally cleaning out his kirk on the edge of the island. And that's it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike and Stephen, for a very informative presentation.
Thanks very much. Very nice presentation. Listening to this presentation, the one before on Lamma Island, what comes to mind is branding efforts of islands. And we know, for example, countries are brands, and there's usually a ranking every year. I like to see which countries are ranked very high. But as an example, Guam is an island that has a different image depending on the market. Many people in the United States see Guam as a military base. People in Japan see Guam as a wedding destination or a honeymoon destination. And so my question, I guess, to you and also for Lamma Island, are the tourism organizations making an effort to brand the destination? For example, using seaweed, or for Lamma, is there also an effort? What do people think of when they hear the name of the island, or when somebody mentions the name of the island? Thank you.
That's a great question. So I'd say that the seaweed industry is branded along the west coast of Ireland, and it's associated with the development of the Great Atlantic Way, which is basically a walking trail right across the western shores of Ireland. What you see when you search is something very much specialized into, excuse me, kind of a green, sort of ecologically sensitive, ecologically responsive attempt to integrate seaweed into contemporary industrial Ireland. The heritage sector as a whole has got, I think it's got two main foci, I think. One is it appeals to the Irish diaspora, which of course is huge, probably one of the largest in the globe, contemporary terms. And that's real in the sense that these heritage centers actually host people from the United States, for example, who are actually genealogically connected to these areas as well, right? So, and they celebrate those connections. There's examples from both the Blasket Islands and the Heritage Center at Lettermullen of this, and then celebrate the decolonial process associated with republicanism, and the recovery of it. So that the recovery of Irish language is absolutely associated with the decolonization of the country. There's no question about that. In fact, one of the reasons we were in Ireland was because of a parallel project on indigenous reappropriation of colonial representations in North America, and you could see very strong resonances across those things. So there's an internal and an external element to this, and the movement of children to the Western Ireland to participate in Irish language instruction. Also this massive engine for moving resources from Dublin, not to put too fine a point, to the Western coast. So branding, interesting, right? I think it's Ireland as a whole. Internally, it's the Gaeltacht, for sure.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation and good morning. In a coastal village in Denmark, where surfers from Denmark and surfers from Germany have settled in the past 20 years, this place is called Cold Hawaii. And all the other coastal villages in this area, they got Cold Hawaii. And they have the exact same coastal line, the same possibilities and so on, of potentials. but it seems so difficult to create branding, and branding seems so hard to craft, and when it's there, then it's genius, then it can really transform and so on. So my question is, when you look at this case, how easy would it be? It's a stupid question in a sense, but how can we take the experience from there and put it elsewhere to use branding as a depopulation? Is it possible to do that, or is it more unique? Is it not only agency, but also chance and other things? What's your reflection on this, on branding? And place branding with, as you mentioned, commodities attached to a specific location and so on.
And I would, well, so there's certainly, this is a coherent, like the Great Atlantic Way is a coherent effort to knit that entire coast into a tourist destination, and every location along that Great Atlantic Way. What a wonderful, and of course the landscape is very similar right across it as well, right? And it's very, very dramatic. Yeah. Every location along that Great Atlantic Way that adds value to the notion of somebody moving from the north to the south along that way is it has a net benefit to the entire enterprise. So I think there's a lot to be said for the coherence, and I think the example you just posed is probably a big mistake, frankly, because you're going to pull in a few folks who are specifically interested in a very small subset of things. But what's there? What do they do, right? And so I mean, and of course, the Irish state now, the Irish economy. I mean, they're bringing they're debating how to spend their surpluses right now in Ireland, which of course is also linked to Google and the kind of the Celtic tiger, which has continued to roar all the way through the last the perturbations of the last 20 years. So I mean, I think it's super interesting. It is interesting that the benefits of the economic growth in the country are absolutely being funneled to and through pride in culture and language. So I think they've kind of got a confluence of very strong factors that support them, and it is that coherence, I think, that we need to look for in other places. Not to put too fine a point on it, you got to be able to tell a good story, and it needs to be true, right? If it's a story and it's not true, it's going to be found out pretty quickly.
Okay, thank you, Mike, and thank you. So, kia ora, good morning, everybody. Ohayou gozaimasu. So, I'm Henry Johnson, and it was nice to follow on from Mike and Stephen's presentation because I'll be focusing on language as well. No seaweed, but also very important for the islands. They have their own name for seaweed, which is rack. And it's used in agriculture, and the farmers would just go down and pick it up off the beaches. But
Sorry, kind of close to the mic.
a bit closer?
Yeah.
Okay, how's that? So the island languages of the Channel Islands, covering the bailiwicks of Jersey and Guernsey, exist in distinct settings of resilience, revitalization, and innovation. Located in an archipelago of jurisdictional difference at the very south of the British Isles, but with geographical proximity to their French mainland, distinct languages developed not only on the relatively small islands of Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney, and Sark, but different dialects were formed within some of the islands. These island languages, which are a branch of the Norman language, but with traits of Breton, Norse, French, and English, were once the everyday vernacular of locals, But internal and external influences on the islands in the late modern era led to their decline. It's just showing how population increased on the largest island of Jersey from 1951, 55,000, and in the present day it's actually about 105,000. And in this context, English became the predominant language across all the islands as the populations have increased. The decline of the languages was a result of increased UK influence through such areas as trade, defence, and inward migration. Along with increased modes of transport and communications, the geographic reach of the islands was extended, and the use of English went hand in hand with increased settlement of native English speakers. In the contemporary era, the languages of the Channel Islands, however, have taken on new meaning, and also in a setting of new migration with Portuguese, especially Madeiran, Polish and Latvian speakers adding to the cultural mix. And Jerier is the local language of the largest island of Jersey. In a setting of severely endangered languages, as defined by UNESCO, language educators and activists acknowledge the importance of local island languages as emblems of island heritage and cultural identity, especially in the island's jurisdictional setting of not being part of the UK nor the European Union. Based on ongoing ethnographic research as an islander myself from Jersey, on the languages of the Channel Islands, this paper discusses recent activities of linguistic activists whose work in the fields of cultural performance, for example, music, festivals, and competitions, highlight the importance of linguistic island culture as a trait of islandness in the broader context of extra and inter-island influences. While the local languages of the Channel Islands were at one time the lingua franca of most islanders, in a context of being British yet closer to France, the islands were not able to maintain a social separatedness from outside influences in the modern era and were subject to the eventual dominance of English. It is perhaps because of their islandness that in historical terms the Channel Islands have been relatively isolated from UK political dominance. Indeed, it is with their Norman influences from their French mainland that the islands often claim an inherent identity, whether through Norman languages, historical migration, cuisine, law, and other social or cultural elements. Even though just a short distance from France, but further from England, the fact that the Channel Islands are islands meant that a sea crossing would have been required to reach them. It is here that islandness is key to comprehending local language identities. That is, the fact of being islands has helped establish distinct local languages, dialects, and connectedness with island space and place. Indeed, the connection with place is foregrounded in Jersey with a Jerier language textbook as used in schools that includes much information about island place names. Settlement from the UK increased rapidly from the 19th century and through the 20th century with increased transport links, particularly in the form of faster shipping and from the age of aviation. Immigration increased much also as a result of the island's dependence on short-term migrants from France and later Portugal and other European countries, all of which added to the island's languages and increasingly cosmopolitan identities. In the second half of the 20th century, the island's finance industries, they created a new sense of identity in the modern era. As such, further migration from the UK added to a rapidly growing population, and subsequently the use of English as the dominant languages. Islands too looked to the UK as a source for tourism. In this setting, the growing influence of English went hand in hand with a with the lowered status of local languages to the extent that they were not encouraged and were even forbidden in schools. And this bit of graffiti was from Guernsey, and I thought it was rather interesting in the context of tax haven culture. By the late 20th century, the decades of local language decline was addressed with an increasing number of organizations and local language activists who aimed to revitalize the island's languages and promote them as emblems of island identity. It is here that the islands they become embodied in language in terms of the island's disconnection from nearby France and the relatively distant UK. In other words, the local languages were once the result of the island's separation from mainlands, but now the languages were being revitalized as a result of increased connectivity to the British and French mainlands. A closer examination of some of these cultural organizations helped show their connections, not only with the languages they are striving to maintain, but also the islands to which they are located. Each of the main Channel Islands of Jersey, Guernsey, Alderney and Sark has one or more such organizations or cultural groups working to foreground island heritage, particularly in connection with the respective islands' language and Norman heritage. That is, island cultural heritage is, to quote Kirschenblatt's Gimbot, is created through a process of exhibition. The languages are framed and recontextualized, transformed in the modern day. Of importance here is that the island's Norman heritage is celebrated as a result of the Channel Islands already being a part of the Duchy of Normandy during the conquest of England in 1066. Further, with the Channel Islands being geographically and culturally very close to their continental mainland, when the French took Normandy in 1204, and King John of England lost his Norman territory, the Channel Islands chose to remain loyal to their Norman Duke, now the King of England. In recent decades, the island's Norman languages have gained a heightened degree of importance that relates directly to the island's relative jurisdictional autonomy. Geographical isolation helped island languages develop within the Channel Islands, and even the lack of internal social movement helped the formation of different dialects within a relatively small space. For example, on Jersey, a number of Norman dialects existed in earlier times that roughly corresponded to the island's Paris system. And this is an island about 20 kilometers by 10 kilometers. Dividing the island into 12 administrative units, each focused on the church, a community, and an honorary policing system. So even today, each of the island's 12 parishes has its own police force, as well as a government-funded police force that covers the entire island. Differences in parish dialects are a particularly important way that islanders locate their island identity with a Jerier discourse. Although with a move towards standardization with education and linguistic activism, the local dialect of Saint-Ouen or Saint-Ouanais, which is over on the west of the island, has become the predominant version of Jerier, which other parishioners now acknowledge. Such differences in dialect development might not be unique to a small island, but the island has since done much to celebrate islandness through such differences. In the educational settings, whether compulsory or voluntary school classes, higher education interest courses, or in speech contests, the island of Jersey is a geographic entity that has come to be connected with islandness through language, learning, and association. In educational settings that aim to promote local heritage languages, there are many songs that are used for pedagogical aims. In Jersey, for example, naming the island or referring to the term island or its location surrounded by sea is a trope in a number of songs that help reinforce the island and cultural identity. Further, translations of well-known songs, mostly from the British Isles or France, but with new lyrics, in Gerrier, these now have several functions. And these include helping with language acquisition, creating a song with a recognizable tune, and also referring to the island, whether in name, location, or place. Some recognizable tunes include songs by Bob Dylan and popular songs such as There Is a Tavern in the Town, Daisy, Daisy, and My Bonnie Lies Over the Ocean. For example, in one island song on Jersey, there are numerous local references which, when used in education, it helps learners comprehend many place names that are used in everyday life and reinforce a sense of islandness. So in island song or chant de Géry, many local landmarks are referenced throughout the song, which helps learners, especially primary school learners, understand what some of the local words mean. This paper has illustrated some of the ways that island languages in the Channel Islands, especially Jersey, provide examples of resilience, revitalization, and innovation. Resilience in the sense of offering something new as a result of language decline, revitalization in terms of maintaining linguistic identity as a marker of island identity, and innovation by showcasing language as island heritage and a part of modern-day island identity. Merci bien de fait. Thank you.
This is really fascinating looking at this island population has doubled since the 50s, when so many other islands followed the reverse trend. And also the increase in an island's language through popular culture, for instance, just as you mentioned, songs. In previous conversations we had, you mentioned that the island has doubled population through incoming migrants like the Portuguese and some other Eastern Europeans who are really embedded in the island life. I remember you had mentioned in another presentation participation in football teams and all that. What is the uptake of the language, of the island language, by this external population coming in? Do they consider that as a way of becoming islanders, inventing the language?
Thank you, Dalia. That's a really good question. So we'll look at Jersey, for example, but it's the same throughout the other islands. So Portuguese migration to the island, it started to become large scale, especially in the 1960s, also from the 50s, but especially from the 1960s. And the island's government had a special connection with the Madeiran government, and many Madeirans came over, but also mainland Portuguese as well. And it's very interesting that the government of Jersey is nowadays using Portuguese also in official documentation, and also Polish. Since the 1990s, there's been a much larger Polish population coming over, often to work in tourism and the various tourism sectors as well. Also, now, originally when Portuguese came over, they worked in farming, then they moved into tourism, and now they're often small business owners, which is quite interesting. But it's also fascinating the way that many new migrants do take on Gerrier as, and it's the same in Genesier in Guernsey, they start to learn the language as a way of identifying with the island and becoming an islander. And in some of the language learning settings that I've been to, I've sat in on especially elementary school classes just to observe what's going on. And the Portuguese children, they're really taking on Jerry. And this is something that their parents would encourage them to do, so they might do half an hour at lunchtime or half an hour after school or something like that. But the fact is, they may speak Portuguese or Madeiran at home, English at school, but then also have that really wonderful ability of taking on another language. And it's the same with the Polish as well. So yeah, it's a good question, but it's fascinating in how some are, and of course some English migrants are also learning the language too. And I think the parents encourage it as well. But at school it's voluntary.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, it's voluntary. They have in Jersey, they have a Jersey studies class that they teach. And then they'll include that booklet.
And it could be that also Taie is very much influenced by French. It's French.
Oh,
yeah, and so Portuguese is a Latin language and there's some commonality there.
Yeah.
But it's really interesting what we also see now at the Roma New Zealand right now with the language policies that Maori, Tereo, is really taken up by the wider population as a way of identifying with the Aotearoa more than the settlers' language, So there's a revival. So perhaps, I don't know, something more can happen in other islands too.
Yeah, language is so important in Ireland as well.
And that was what you were saying about seaweed cultivation is mostly in these Gaelic-speaking parts of the island, and whether this rebranding of the seaweed industry might also have an impact on Gaelic being more spoken or becoming more visible.
I think it's not being made, but that's a very good question. Yeah. Its context is not actually overtly linked in the branding.
Yeah, so you make something visible and then people are aware, right?
Yes.
One more quick question. Okay.
Something for me, I have one question. 20 years ago, I visited Thailand for research with JPA. At that time, only one small association, la Société JPA, that is only promoter of revitalization for JPA. Actually, the other association participate the revitalization activities. Société Jersey is not exist now.
The Société Jersey is celebrating 150 years and it's still going very well. It has many branches, and it has the language branch, and the language branch has been running, I think it's about 20 years. But there are many other organizations. La Don Balain is really promoting Jerrier, the states of Jersey, or the government of Jersey. They have just, in the last probably 8 years, 5 to 8 years, they've now employed 4 language teachers who go around all the schools, mainly primary schools, but they are going to secondary school, high schools as well. There's the Heritage Trust also puts on or frames these heritage events. There are links, organizations that link with mainland France. La Fête de Normandie is an annual fête that rotates between Jersey, Guernsey, and Normandy. And again, as an organization. So yeah, so to answer your question, Société Jersiaise, which is the Society for Jersey, is still going very strong, and all the branches within it are going very strong, and other ones as well. And it's just growing. Yeah.
Small one more question. That you talked about Portuguese and
Yep.
At that time, 23 years ago, the most immigrant people were not Portuguese, but Indian. Many Indian migration living in Bisan. Actually,
Not India.
Indian.
Maybe a few, but not many. Not many at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, you might have to put that back on there. So, our last presentation today is Mori Tomoya, sorry. Mori Tomoya will be talking about the governance of regional resources in the Setouchi Bisan Islands. So, thank you.
Okay, first of all, I'd like to thank SICRI, Small Island Cultures Research Initiative, for inviting me to talk about today. So, today I'd like to talk about a program of Japan heritage in Bisan Islands for utilizing regional resources and promoting tourism development, and then revitalizing local societies. This is the outline of my presentation. Okay, let's start my presentation. First, I'd like to show the location Bisan Shoto. Now we stay in Miyajima here. So Bisan Shoto, Setouchi Bisan Islands are located between Okayama Prefecture and Kagawa Prefecture in Setouchi area of the sea of Seto Inland Sea. These islands have an attractive and unique natural environment, in addition to local culture, historical heritage, and tradition. So people can see beautiful sunrise or sunset and can eat good food. And cute cats welcome to you. but I don't know their intention. Oh, welcome to my islands, or please give me food. So after this conference, post-conference, so you go to Naoshima.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. So please here, cat. So don't forget to food. So go back to presentation. However, as well as for other islands, the socio-economic condition of these islands has become worse. For example, population decline. Some residents and public sector have turned to tourism for revitalization of the local economy and community. Some of the Bisan Islands are trying to use historical episode, customs, heritage, and cultural properties relating to stone as tourism resources, and to promote tourism by utilizing them. This strategy is carried out based on Japan heritage, stone islands of Setouchi. So the aim of this study is to analyze the programs and potential this tourism strategy in these islands based on Japan heritage program. So I'd like to explain what is Japan heritage. The program was launched in 2015, and 104 heritage stories has been recognized so far. The program of Japan Heritage focus on not on heritage or cultural properties themselves, but on heritage stories that are handed down in local culture and traditions based on the regional historical locations and features. The stories are recognized as Japan Heritage by the Agency of Cultural Affairs. The aim of Japan Heritage is the revitalization of local communities through comprehensively maintaining and utilizing attractive, tangible, intangible cultural properties and promoting them both within Japan and overseas. Considering these points, Japan Heritage differ from UNESCO World Heritage and designated cultural properties. Japan Heritage focus on heritage story, but not on heritage or cultural properties themselves. It is designed for the utilizing of heritage stories rather than their protection, in order to assist local communities to revitalize themselves. So heritage stories are based on these criteria. They must reflect the location's historical background and local custom handed down through generation, a clear theme to promote the attraction of the area. They must encourage people who do not have knowledge of local history or cultural properties to become interested in the stories, not only through explanation, but also through having first-hand experience. So, and then heritage stories are categorized in two types. Local category. Local category means a narrative pertaining a single municipality, collective network, or a collective or network category, a narrative pertaining to several municipalities. The heritage story of Setouchi, Stone Island of Setouchi, was recognized in the collective category by the Agency of Cultural Affairs in 2019. It was created by networking resources and properties among 4 municipalities, 2 cities, Kasaoka City in Okayama Prefecture and Marugami City in Kagawa Prefecture, and 2 towns, Tonoshocho in Kagawa Prefecture and Shodoshima-cho in Kagawa Prefecture. I would like to show the location: Kasaoka City and Marugami City, and Tonoshocho. Tonoshocho and Shodoshima-cho. Actually, Shodoshima-cho divided 2 parts: Tonoshocho and Shodoshima-shocho. Naoshima, neighboring is Tonoshocho. Basically, the core of the story is based on the fact the stone from these islands has been used in Japanese building from pre-modern to modern times. For example, the wall of Osaka Castle, the Bank of Japan in Tokyo, the Marunouchi building at Tokyo Station. This is a quarrying site. So the people quarrying stones like this. In relation to this, the heritage story of the stone islands of Setouchi is composed by 3 sub-stories. The first, quarrying stone. Secondly, shipping the stone away from the island to Osaka or to Kyoto. So, thirdly, lifestyle and culture connected to the stone quarrying industry. For example, the song by the labor of quarrying, or ishikiri, some food to which labor ate in the past. After the Agency of Cultural Affairs gave Japan Heritage status to or historical story, it was necessary to establish a committee to promote the Bisan Island through cooperation among several stakeholders in 2 cities and 2 towns. To put it simply, the committees consist of not only public sector stakeholders, but also the private sector, including quarrying businesses and tourism association for the 4 municipalities. In addition, Okayama and Kagawa prefectures act as advisors to support the committee. Okay, move to analysis part. Basically, what the implication of the Stone Island Setouchi heritage story in considering the promoting tourism in these islands? Basically speaking, the heritage story involves networking between cultural properties, histories, and the other resources of each local community. If local community cooperate with each other and share resources for tourism development, the network can provide more profit to local community than if they do it alone. Okay. Also, heritage story is expected to create more value for tourism in the region. In that sense, Japan heritage status has some potential to promote tourism development in these islands. However, in order to promote, it is necessary the local community have an incentive to put their resources into Japan heritage program or such a local community. Moreover, when local communities are not homogeneous, or the relationship among them is asymmetric, it is difficult for them to cooperate with each other. In that sense, it is necessary to take this into consideration when designing the governance structure. Actually, there is variation among the islands in the number of cultural properties they have. Also, the stone story each island is different. In addition, can tourists actually discover heritage story Stone Island of Setouchi by visiting their islands or seeing cultural property, also will be attracted by the heritage story. As mentioned above, these points are related to conditions that heritage story must fulfill before it can be approved by agency. In fact, it is not clear whether the heritage story works as resources for attracting tourists, even though the story has been approved. Also conducted interview survey to analyze the program. Actually, at this point, this research has only can be able to visit 3 islands, Kitagi, Ijima, Shiraishi-jima, Manabi-jima in Kasaoka City, and also public office and tourism association in Kasaoka City. So we got 3 findings of this interview survey. Firstly, its issue is about the guide program. It is difficult to tourists to access information about the guide to Stone Island of Setouchi. In fact, there are no web service and pointed them towards such information. Moreover, committee do not provide a number of tour guides, and it does not manage the group of guides to help tourists appreciate the heritage story. In addition, in reality, each island only has few guides who are engaged with Japan heritage story. The guide who guided us on 3 islands, we visit only provide information about their own islands, the cultural properties on them. Finally, the survey discovered that it's difficult for tourists to access information. Secondly, the survey indicates that it is difficult for tourists to go around several islands and properties, especially those which are in prefecture. This is because ferry service do not give the opportunity for tourists to enjoy and learn in depth about heritage story of Stone Island Setouchi. Also, no regular tour are provided. As a result, it is possible for tourists not to realize the full nature of the heritage story if they only visit a few properties or tourism sites. This figure shows access to island Kasaoka City. If people after visited Manabejima Islands, they want to go Hishima or Mushima, it is difficult. If the tourist use sea taxi, so can do, but it is very expensive for tourists. Finally, the survey shows that the residents of each island have difficult recognition of heritage story. This is because there is variation among the properties on each island and their story. Basically, most islands have not been related with quarrying in modern times, while Kitagishima Island and Shiraishijima Island is still engaged with it. It is supposed that most residents are indifferent toward this program, Japan heritage, such as residents of Manabeshima Island, who they think of the story only as a story of quarrying the stone. Consequently, it is impossible that this program may not have the incentive structure to encourage residents to invest their resources in it. This box shows designated cultural properties in Kasaoka City. Kitagishima have a lot of the property, but other islands one or two properties. Okay. Proposal. This research makes 3 proposals for development tourism through Japan heritage in the islands. First, providing guide who can relate heritage story and tell tourists about the attractiveness of the islands. Secondly, develop tours so that tourists can visit a lot of properties and islands across the prefectures and comprehend the whole heritage story, designing governance so that residents who can not directly be related to quarrying can participate in the network of the Setouchi Islands. Okay, thank you for listening. Actually, this is the second time I visited Miyajima Islands. So 15 years ago I visited here. So after presentation, at last I can enjoy Miyajima for the first time. Yeah. Okay, it was a pleasure being there today. Thank you.
Questions?
Oh, quick comment.
Quick comment.
So one little piece about Stone Island. I just shared you a link about Tim Anderson's new book published in 2020 about urban stone stories. That is very interesting. Now those stone islands are in the peripheral, so maybe you can also follow that theory to develop something uniqueness about stone on island.
Thank you.
I have a quick question. Do you think the idea of quarrying some of the islands was the fact that they could quarry the islands, move the stone to Tokyo and wherever, and because they were peripheral, it didn't really matter if they destroyed the landscape or anything? Maybe not.
Yeah.
You think, well, yeah, you think about that.
Hi, I just have a quick question because I read recent thesis about podcasting and how that can be a new way maybe to consider to kind of increase sustainable tourism. So I was wondering, have you ever considered doing a podcast about the island so that way we can engage with potential tourists? Because I think the average person that listens to a podcast earns about $70,000 a year as their salary, so we see kind of like that potential of someone like that, or the average consumer of a podcast can actually have the ability to travel. And it has worked for some other cold islands on all over the world. One of them is from PEI, and it has been successful. It kind of engages people and makes them interested in those different sites that are not just for tourists, but like from history. So I think that could be a way to engage with other people or with a wider audience. So if you make it to be feasible for the island or maybe the local government to invest in that or any other person? Because creating a podcast doesn't take that much money. It's just you need a reporter and access to online internet connection, and that's it. You're there. That's how the podcast in PI with PI Museum started. So yeah, I was wondering if you ever consider something like that.
What kind of indication?
Yes, thank you for a good question. I'm not sure I can answer your question. So I think it is important guide, especially the local resident guide. So they can, how to say, make they actually, so how to say this? So in general, the stone is, how to say, not attractiveness for I think so the general tourist. So but so actually before the research, I'm not interested in the stone. So, but the local resident guide told me so the attractiveness of each island's stone culture or history. So I have gotten to interested in this history. So yeah, but when I gave the presentation, so this story is only in, how to say, in story of each island, not the story. Yeah. So I think it is important to communicate with each island resident. So to how to say, make story attractiveness. Yeah.
Okay, we are running out of
Okay, we're going to finish now, but thank our presenters one more time, please.